Hi, this is Ali Arangu of Gaming Visuals, and today I want to show you how to make a working health bar in Gdevelop 5. So let's get started. Okay, what you're looking at is the front page for Gdevelop 5. The first thing we want to do is select create a new project. We then want to, I'm going to scroll down, we're then going to select empty game. Okay, after selecting empty game, what you want to do is look towards your left. See where we see scenes here. What you want to do is look to this plus to the right, below scenes. You're going to left click there. Now we see new scene. Now you're going to left click right next to this new scene, or right on new scene. And after I did that, now you can see this opened up. What we're going to do is we're going to click on this X to get rid of that panel. If you want to bring that panel back, we can just left click here and this will come right back. Okay, we want to look to our right where we see objects. We want to click the plus button, and then we want to, when we click the plus button, this brought up our add a new project, or add a new object menu. Then we want to select sprite, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go to where we see object name. We're going to left click, and I'm just going to change this name to player. Okay, so what we want to do now is look to our right, this plus button. We're going to left click on this plus button. Now we're going to look to the plus button on our left. We're going to left click there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my desktop where I have the files that I want to bring in. So I'm going to go to tutorial sprites in my case. These sprites that you see here, I'll put a link in the description so you can get to these sprites. You can follow along with this tutorial. I'm going to double click on idle. And these are the idle sprites that I have for the player I want to bring in. So I'm going to hold control, and then while holding control, I'm going to press A. And by holding control and then A, that just is a shortcut that allows me to select all of these sprites. I'm then going to click open. Okay, so now all of these sprites came in. And what you want to do is, see where you see this don't loop? You want to left click this so that now this will loop instead of not looping. And then where you see this clock, this is where our timing is set up for our idle animation. What you want to do is click here. I'm going to change this to 0.08. And then I'm going to left click on the preview button to see how this idle animation looks. As far as the timing, that looks fine to me. So now I'm going to left click on close. And what we have here is what we need. So we're going to left click on apply now. Okay guys, that's it for that tutorial. I hope you learned something. For those of you who liked videos on this channel, reshare this video, give it a thumbs up. If you like the videos on game visuals and you would like to see more, please subscribe, and thank you for watching. Okay, if you're saying why are we bringing in the player, the reason why we brought the player in is because I want to show you how to make a working health bar. And for the health bar to be working, basically what we're going to do is we're going to have the player go against an opponent. The player is going to shoot the opponent. When the player shoots the opponent is going to react by having its health bar lower down, and then once the health bar gets all the way down to where there's no health bar left, then the opponent will disappear. So that's what we're doing. So we have our player. Now we want to add our opponent. So we're going to click this plus button here. We're going to select sprite. We're going to change this new object to opponent. Very similar to before, we're going to go to the right. We're going to click on the plus button. We're going to go to the left. We're going to click on the plus button there. And I'm going to where my opponent sprites are at. So I'm going to left click here. Okay, and these are the sprites that I want. I want all of the sprites in this folder, so I'm going to hold control, and then while holding control, I'm going to press A. By holding control and pressing A, I selected all of the sprites. I'm now going to click open. And now all of the sprites are in here. we want to go to where we see don't loop. We want to left click this so that this animation loops. That's what that loop is referring to. And now I'm going to go to this timing here. I'm going to left click here, or actually left click right on the one. I'm going to change this to 0.05. And then I'm going to click preview. I'm going to scroll down. And I'm just looking to see how the animation timing looks. Looks good to me. So I'm going to left click on close. I'm then going to left click on apply. Okay, so now that we have our player as well as our opponent, I'm going to left click and drag the player onto the screen. I'm going to roll my mouse wheel to zoom back. I'm going to move the player up, and this black outline you see is basically showing the outline of our screen. So I'm going to hold shift, and I'm going right to this diagonal corner edge, and while I'm holding shift, I'm just moving my mouse to shrink our player down. So now I'm going to left click on the opponent. I'm going to left click and drag this onto our screen. And I'm just left clicking and dragging to put our opponent on the screen. I'm going to hold shift, do the same thing. And while I'm holding shift, I'm just scaling this down. Placing that, I'm going to make our player smaller as well. Okay, now what I'm going to do, let me move the player away a little. I'm going to click on the preview so we can see what's going on here. Okay, we can see our player as well as our opponent. I'm going to make the opponent actually bigger. Let's do a preview again. Okay, I like how that looks. Okay, our goal is to have our player fire at our opponent. Gdevelop is an amazing piece of software. It is extremely amazing that this thing is actually free. What we're going to do is we're going to use another amazing thing about Gdevelop, and what that is Gdevelop has the ability to make graphics right inside of it. So that's what we're going to do now. So we're going to click on this plus to the right. We're going to go to sprite, left click there. We're going to left click next to new object. We're going to name this bolt. We're going to click this plus to the right. We're going to click not this plus to the left like we did before when we brought in the idle animations. This time we're going to go to edit with Pisco. Pisco is the built-in editor inside of Gdevelop. So we're going to left click on that. And this is Pisco right here. I'm going to click on the circle tool because our primary color is black. We're going to left click and drag. Well, it's not because it's black, we're left click and drag, but when we left click and drag, we have this black outline because our primary color is black. Where we're going to go now is to this paint bucket tool. The paint bucket tool will allow us to fill this area in very quickly. So we're going to click on our primary color. I'm going to drag over this blue, and then I'm going to left click and drag over this blue here. Now I'm going to left click to fill in this area here. So now we have our bolt. I'm going to left click here and name this to bolt. Now what you name the actual sprite isn't that important, but since it's there, we'll name it bolt. So we're going to then left click, save to Gdevelop. And then for this, since this is just an image, it's not an animation, we don't have to be concerned about the timing. We're just going to left click on apply. Okay, now you know how to do some editing with Pisco. That's good. We're going to use it again. We need to make our health bars. So we're going to go to this plus to the right. We're going to left click there. We're going to go to sprite. We're going to left click there. We're going to left click next to new object. We're going to name this health bar. We're then going to click this plus to the right. And now we're going to go similar to what we did before. We're going to left click on Edit with Pisco. So here's Pisco again. Pisco's default settings are 32 by 32. We're going to change the width to 320 by 80. And when we did that, you can see nothing changed here. We need to go to resize. We're going to left click on resize, and now our canvas resized to the to what we set this up to be 320 by 80 pixels. Okay, so we need to fill this in. So what we're going to do is we're going to left click on our primary color. We'll pick a reddish color. It's already set up for us there. I'll left click to get out of that. I'm going to go to the paint bucket, and then I'm going to left click here to fill this in with this reddish color. I guess that is red, not reddish. We're going to go to new object. We're just going to name this health. We're then going to select save to Gdevelop. And then we don't, this isn't an actual animation. This is just a sprite. So we're going to left click on apply. Okay, so we have all of the graphical elements that we need. Our bolt can stay where it's at because it's going to come out from our player. However, our health bar, we want to left click on that and drag that out to our screen. And after we do that, our characters here aren't going to move. Our player is basically going to follow. And the point of this tutorial is to have this health bar react when the player fires at the opponent. With that being the case, even though our characters aren't actually going to move, I want to make sure that you know how to have this health bar set up correctly so that if you move, this would be how it should be. And to do that, I need to explain to you that in Gdevelop there are layers. So what you see right here, when we drag these sprites out onto our main work area here, they're all on the base layer, okay? For the health bar, we want this to be on a separate layer. So how do you do that? Go to the upper right and you'll see, looks like they did a good symbol for Gdevelop. This looks like layers, and that's what it is. You're going to left click on that and this layers panel opens up. So here you can see the base layer, and that's where everything is at right now. We want to have our health bar be moved to another layer. So we're going to left click on this plus to the right, and then we're just going to get rid of that name, and we're going to change this to UI. It can be however you want it to be. So now that that's UI, we're going to okay, we left click, this still stays. We're going to click this X here to get that to go away. And now what we're going to do is we're going to click on our health bar on our work area. All right, so there's the health bar over here. You can click on. When I click on this, you don't see anything happen. So it's not clicking on the health bar to the right. It's clicking on the health bar that's in your work area, okay? So when I click on this, now when you look here, you can see these different properties options. Look where you see this layer, it says base layer. We want this to be on the UI layer we just made. So we're going to look for this triangle here. We're going to left click on that triangle. Then we're going to left click on UI. So even though it doesn't look like anything happened, our health bar is now on our UI layer, and that's what we want. Okay, there's one more thing that we need to do in this general area before we can move on to programming. And what we need to do is we're going to go to our player. We're going to double click. When we double clicked our player, we came back to we can see our idle animation. Where this is where we set up our timing. If we look to our left, we see edit hitboxes as well as edit points. These points are important, particularly when you're dealing with things such as projectiles coming out of a character. We're going to left click on edit points. When we scroll down, actually before we scroll down, see this right here? This point right here is our origin point. That's what that is right there. Now we have the center point. I'm going to scroll down. Here's the center point here, all right? we want to make another point so that we can have a projectile come out of that point. So what we're going to do that is we're going to scroll down. See this plus here to the right? We're going to left click on that plus to the right. And this is our new point. So I'm going to change this name to FP, which stands for firing point. The reason why I'm changing this to FP is just so because it's very easy to type in 2 letters, FP. We're going to have to retype this again. So I'm going to just put in FP to see our point. And this is the real main reason why I'm just doing this next part is just to see our point. So I'm going to left click here. I'm going to change this to 115. And then I'm going to left click here and change this to 35. Now the reason why I did that is that allows me to get the point, this new point, to a place where I can see it. So now that I see it, I can drag it. Now when I drag it, those numbers that I put in will change. And that's fine. We're going to visually look at this point. Now the reason why I'm moving this point down is I'm thinking of, when I think of a projectile coming out from a player, I don't think of it as coming above its head. I think of it as coming around the center point of the body. So we're going to have the projectile, the bolt that we made, come out from here. And because we have this set up as its own point, we can adjust this point. It's very important. Another thing, you see how right now you see these 2 blue symbols here? This is turned on for share same points for all animations. And then this other blue shows that share same points for all sprites of this animation are turned on. You want this to be turned on to have this properly work right. Okay. Okay, so with that set up, we're going to left click on close, and then we're going to left click on apply. Okay, so now that our graphical elements are set up, we can left click on new scene events. When we click here, we see this message, there are no events here. Events are composed of conditions and actions. Add your first event using the first buttons of the toolbar. So what we want to do is this button right here, we're going to left click. And what that did was that added an event in here. An event, like what we just learned, is made up of a condition and an action. The way you want to think of conditions is when something happens, the condition basically defines when something happens, and the action defines what happens. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to have our character fire the bolt graphic we made out. So we're going to click add condition. We have all these different conditions here. One of the things that's great about Gdevelop is it makes sense. It's very well made. It is amazingly easy to use, and it generally makes sense. Particularly if you were coming from an artist's perspective, which is what we focus here on game visuals. Gdevelop is just amazing. So what we want to do is we want to press a button on the keyboard to have the projectile come out. So here we see keyboards. We're going to left click. So then after we left click on keyboard, now we select key pressed. And this just makes sense to me. I just really like how it's set up. I'm going to press and pick the N key, mainly because I don't want to use the space key, but the N key is towards the center of the keyboard. So I'm just going to press the N as in lowercase n. Now, when I pressed N to pick this key, I also could have scrolled through the list and then left clicked on the key. I just chose to pick N. However, you could have scrolled through there. Okay, so now with that done, I'm going to click OK. Okay, so now we have told Gdevelop when the N key is pressed, we want something to happen. So what do we want to happen? That's what we're going to set up next. So one of the things in Gdevelop that's important for you to be aware of, I want to make what's called a sub-event. A sub-event is something that is connected to the event, which this is the event right here. When I say event, I'm talking about something that is condition and an action. So this is one event right here. Now, when I press on this right here, this N key is pressed. This isn't technically the event being picked on. This is like an element in the event being selected. I want to left click beneath here. Now, see how this blue line is going all along here? So this is the actual event is selected. That's important because I want to make a sub event. So with this, see how you see that blue line with things set up like that. Now I can go to this add sub event button, left click. Now here's a sub event. Sub event, you can tell what a sub event is because of this indentation here. And a sub event is dependent on the event. What we have set up is we set up when the N key is pressed, we want something to happen. And now what we want to happen is we want for the bolt to be set up to come out of our player. So what we need to do is we need to create the bolt at the point that we set up. That's why we set up that point. Remember the point we named FP? So what we're going to do is we're going to select Add Action. And we're going to go to Common Action for all objects. A lot of times if you're not sure what you're going for in Gdevelop, it'll be, as far as selecting an event, it'll be Common Action. I should say selecting a condition or that, it'd be Common Action for all objects. We're going to left click here. And then we're going to select objects because we want to create an object. So now we look here, create an object. We're going to left click on create an object. So then this says create an object at a specified position. So the object that we want to sit, and then it says object to create. It's just very easy to understand. I'm commenting on it because it's just nice. It deserves to be commented on in a positive way for just being simple. Anyway, object to create. We're going to left click on bolt. And then here we have this position here. So one of the things that you'll hear a lot of different programs, particularly for gaming, talking about is how you don't have to put any code in. In my experience, you always have, let me define what I mean by code. When I mean code, I mean you having to type something. In my experience with whatever gaming thing I've used, you have to put in some amount of code. There's always, and again, I'm defining code as you having to type something in. All right. So Gdevelop does that. You do have to type things in. However, it does it like the rest of Gdevelop in just a very nice, easy way to figure out. So we need this exposition here. So what you can do to get this exposition is you're going to left click on this blue button to the right. You're going to scroll up. You're going to select Common Expressions for all. You're going to go down to position. You're going to left click on position. You're going to scroll down. And then you see here's this exposition. So we're going to left click there. And then we're going to left click here. Now this is basically what's going on is this is first we selected in here and you can see like outside in the gray outside of the white, see where it says object create is the bolt, right? That's what we want. The object to be created is the bolt. We already selected the bolt, right? Now we want the bolt to be selected at a particular point of something, which in that object that we want to select this bolt at is our player. All right. So we're going to left click our player, and I'm just going to the side here to click outside to get that menu to pop away. Now I'm going to select done. So basically what's going on, we want to create an object, which is the bolt, at the position of the player's exposition. This right here is pretty much a repeat. We're going to click here, scroll up to the top, common expression for all objects. We're going to go to position, scroll down, select Y position, and then again, we're creating the object bolt that's already set up. This is setting up for the point of what the projectile is coming from, which is the player. So we're going to left click on the player, and I'm just going to the right to click out to get the menu to go away. That's selectable. Now I'm going to select done. Okay, so now we have this basic setup right here, right? To have this come out at that new point that we made, this is important. You're going to go to the right of this period here. You're going to put in Shift, capital P, O-I-N-T. All right. And then after that, what you're going to do is inside of these parentheses, you're going to put in the name of the point, which is FP. You're going to do the same thing here. So you're going to go to the right of the period there, capital P, okay, capital P, not lowercase p. Point, you're going to go inside here, and then you're going to type in FP. And then with that done, now you can click OK. And now you see this code here. Okay, so now we have things set up for the object to be made. So in key is pressed. When that happens, we have this sub event connected to the press. The action says what's going to happen, create an object at position. What we need to do now is we need to add a force to have this projectile actually move, this bolt actually move. So what we're going to do is click add action. We're going to go to common action for all objects. We're going to go to movement, and we have all these different options. Now be aware, we have add a force angle and add a force. We want add a force angle, okay? Just to be clear, you do not want right now add a force. You want add a force angle. So hovering over add a force angle, knowing that we need add a force angle, you're going to left click on add a force angle. Okay. So with this, we see add a force to an object. This object will move according to all of the forces it has. This action creates the force using the specified angle and length. So we're putting this force to an object. That object is bolt. So we're going to left click there. Okay, so this right here in Gdevelop, think of the default position of pointing in Gdevelop as being to the right. And what I mean is if you have a circle, okay, to the right of that circle, Gdevelop sees that as 0, and to the left, Gdevelop sees that as 180. So you might say, what is he talking about? Basically, when you make a sprite come into Gdevelop, Gdevelop sees, I'm trying to think of, Gdevelop sees the default setting of that sprite is pointing to the right. So 0 equals point to the right. If you can imagine a circle right here, right? 0 will be point to the right. The opposite direction is 180, which would be point to the left. All right. So our character is pointing to the left, not the right. So if the character is pointing to the right, for the angle, we will put in 0. Since the character is pointing to the left, we're going to left click here and put in 180. Okay, so now this right here is going to determine how fast the projectile is going to go. We're going to left click here. We're going to put in 400 pixels. So this is going to move at 400 pixels per second. And then this damping, we need this to be set to 1 for our projectile to shoot out. So with all of that done, we're going to left click on OK. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to test this out to make sure this works. So we're going to go to our preview button right here, launch a preview of the scene. We're going to click that. And now we're going to press the N key. And you can see there's our projectiles coming out. Too low. So we can adjust that since they're coming out so low. We'll go back to new scene. We'll double click on our player. We're going to go to edit points. Here is our FP point. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise this up higher. Then we're going to select close, then apply. And even though we're on another screen, we still have our preview button here. So we're going to click our preview button. And now our projectile is coming out from the center point of our player, which is what I want. I'm going to close this now. Okay, when we had our projectiles coming out, you see how they were all bunched up, right? We can fix that. The way we can fix that is by adding in something called a timer. And a timer will allow our projectiles to come out in a way where they're not all bunched up. To do that, we want to look back to our main event here. Now we have this sub event, we have this event here. So it's like, well, what is the difference between having the stuff up here and having it down here? This stuff right here is kind of like a help. This allows you to have things that are all dependent on this here. A lot of times the things you put in a sub event, you could make whole new events, but sometimes you might have to make multiple events instead of just having them all connected to one event. So sub events are dependent on events. Okay, so for this, what we want to set up is a timer. We're going to set this up in the event, not the sub event. So how do we do that? We're going to go to add a condition. So this is the event, right? And this is the condition. Our conditions are here, actions are here. So we're adding another condition to the same event. So I'm going to click add condition. I'm going to scroll down and I'm looking for timers and time. I'm going to left click here and we're going to go to value of a scene timer. Don't let the name of that get to you. Just know that this is going to allow us to make our timer. All right. I'm going to left click there. And for our time in seconds, this is a time in between our bullets. This is going to be the thing that keeps our bullets from being bunched up. So we're going to put in 0.025. Now we need a name for the timer, right? So for the name, we're gonna name this bolt timer. So I'm gonna hold Shift, select quotations. Some things in Gdevelop need quotations. It's actually pretty easy to remember. Things that you put in yourself, a lot of times, like names, particularly names, need to have quotations around them. Okay, so we put in a quotation. We're going to name this bolt. I'm going to put a capital T, timer. And then I'm going to hold Shift and put in quotations again. And this is actually, I apologize, this is actually 0.25 that we want. So this is going to be a quarter of a second. All right. So this is the time is set for 0.25. Our timer's name is bolt timer, which we know since we named it, this needs to be put in quotations to have this work correctly. So now with that done, we're going to click OK. Okay, so our timer is set up. We're saying there we want, when this N key is pressed, we want, things to be set up so that when every quarter of a second, 0.25 of a second, something happens. So now over here in the action, we set up the what. And what that what is we want to be done is we want to reset this timer so that every time this N key is pressed, this timer makes our bullets spaced out. And long story short, that makes it so our bullets aren't our bullets or bolts aren't all bunched up. So I'm going to click Add Action. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to look for timers and time. I'm going to left click. I'm going to go to Start or Reset a Scene Timer. I'm going to left click. This wants to know the name of this being Gdevelop wants to know the name of our scene timer. We're going to put in quotation, bolt. Remember, we put a capital T on this. It's got to be exact, by the way. Timer, quotation. So with that, we're then going to click OK. Okay, so let's test this out to see how this works. How it looks, I should say. Works and looks. Okay, and you can see now I can hold the button down, or even when I press the button, our bolts are spaced out nicely. So that's what we want. So I'm going to click here to close that. Okay, for the things that happen here, as well as any sub-events here, I only want this to happen one time when we press this N key. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Add Condition. I'm going to go to Advanced. And I'm going to go to this Trigger Once While True. I'm going to left click there. And then I'm going to click OK. And this just sets it up so that this will only, these things here, as well as these sub-events, will only happen once when we press that N key. Okay, now after all that, now we're finally going to get to our health bar. We're going to go to New Scene. And we want this health bar to react to when this opponent is being hit, okay? So we want to put a variable on this opponent. And a variable is basically a holder of things. In this case, it's holding information of a value. And that value is 100, okay? So we want to put a variable on this that says this can be hit basically 100 times, all right? And the way we're going to do that is we're going to look to where we see opponent here. We're going to left click and see where we see Edit Object Variables. We're going to left click here. Now this doesn't have any object variables, so we're going to click plus. And then we see this variable here name. We want to change this to a name that makes sense. We're going to name this capital V, so we know this is dealing with a variable. then health. So that's the name of this variable. And this variable is basically a container. It's going to hold a value. That value is 100. So we're going to left click. So there's two lines, v health. We're going to click here. And here is going to be where we put the value in. This is how we know that this is 100. And this basically means our life bar, health bar, life bar, health bar, same difference for the most part. Our health bar is a 100. So we're going to enter in 100. Then we're going to click apply. Okay, so now that we have variable set up, and remember, we put the variable on the opponent, not on the life bar. The life bar is going to health bar. The health bar is going to show what happens to the opponent, but the variable is on the opponent. This is just showing what happens. You understand? The variable is here. Okay, so we're going to go to back to new scene events. And if anybody's out there, I'm used to doing tutorials. I have a Blender tutorial where I have a good deal of Blender tutorials on there. Sometimes people get upset with me the way I explain things. I'm explaining things for artists. If you're a programmer, you're looking, why is he explaining that, blah, 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 that way. I'm explaining it for artists. I'm also explaining it for just in the easiest way that I personally can think of how to explain it. If you're just wondering, like, why am I saying things like the way I'm saying that? That's how I do things with my Blender tutorials. That's how I'm doing it with Gdevelop as well. So anyway, with that done, what we want to do is we want to make up a new event now. So to make up that new event, we want to make sure that this is our sub event. We don't want to click here. We click here. We just don't want to. We want to click here. The way you can tell you're clicked right. See this blue line going along here? We know we're clicked correctly on this event, and that means we can left click on new event. Now we have this new event right here. Now you can move the events around and adjust them. However, it's easier just to make them up the right way. So, and some of the way I'm explaining this too is I am fairly new to Gdevelop. As I learned Gdevelop myself, just some of the small things that I didn't think of, like making an event. You know, I was clicking here, so that's why I'm telling you guys this stuff. Okay, so a condition shows Gdevelop when something happens, and the action tells Gdevelop what to do when that happens. Sometimes you want an action to go constantly, not look for one specific thing to happen, but just to run constantly. When you want that to happen, you leave that condition empty. That's the case with what we want to do here. And what we want to do here is we want to have the bolt. We want to have the health bar correspond to our opponent. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to left click on add action. We're going to go to sprite. We're going to go down to size. And then see this scale on X axis. We're going to left click there. And we want to modify the scale, the width of an object. Which object do we want to modify? That would be the health bar. Okay. So we want to put an equal sign because we're basically connecting the health bar to our opponent. So we're going to left click here. We're going to select equal or set to. And then for this, what we want to do is we want to go to the variable of our opponent. So we're going to click here. We're going to go up to common action for all objects. We're going to scroll down to variables. Now it's important that you went up to common action for all objects, then variables. The reason why I say that is there's variables. There's multiple variables. There's object variables, scene variables, and global variables in Gdevelop. We want to work with an object variable. So by going to common action for all, then come down to variables, we can see our objects variable here, which is the type of variable that we want to work with. We're going to left click here. Then we're going to go to object. And the object that we want the variable for is our opponent. So we're going to left click on opponent. I'm going to the side here just to see this menu. I want to get that out of the way. So I'm going to left click there. Now here's our variable. So we left click. And now we can see our v health, which is what we want. That's the variable of our opponent object. So we're going to left click there. And then now we can click done. So now we have this code generated for us from clicking that the blue button there. So now we're going to click OK. And now we can see this code here, and that's what we want. Okay, so now we're going to click the preview button to see how this looks. And you see our health bar is all stretched out here. So how can we get this not to look like that? Fairly easy. There's multiple ways of doing this. I'm going to double click here. I'm going to go to this code here. This is important. You want to have a space in between here and what you're about to do next. So I'm going to press the space bar once. And now I put in this symbol here. I always think of like the divide symbol. And then I want another space. So another space. Just so you know, there's a space here. There's also a space here. So with those two spaces there, we're going to put in 100 and then we're going to click OK. So now we're going to preview this. And now we can see our space bar looks more like it did before. Space bar, our health bar looks more like it did than before. Okay, so now this gives us the correlation between our health bar and our opponent. So what we want to do now is we're clicking here just so we can see this blue here because we want to make a new event. All right, so now I'm going to click new event. Now for this new event, what we want to do is now we want to tell Gdevelop when something happens. That when is when our opponent actually gets hit by the projectile. So we need to set up a collision. So when the bolt collides with the opponent, we want something to happen. So we're going to click Add Condition, Common Conditions for all objects, and then we're going to go to Collision, and then we're going to click on Collision again. And the collision is between the opponent and the bolt. And I don't think in this case the order matters. So now we're going to click OK. So Gdevelop is saying, okay, when the opponent is in collision with the bolt, we want something to happen. Now what we want to happen is we want for our health to go down. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to click Add an Action. And then we're going to go to Common Action for all. We're going to look for variables, modify a variable of an object. We're going to left click. Okay, the object that we want to modify the value of a variable of an object, that object is our opponent. And then the variable is vHealth. And what we want in this case is we want to subtract. And we want to subtract 10 from our health bar when our bolt hits it. So with this set up, we're going to click OK. And then with that set up, let's hit preview. So now when we press our N key, the health bar goes down, but the health bar goes down too quick. Why is that? Well, if you look, see how that bolt, when I press it, is in connection with this opponent. It has to actually travel through here. So it's in connection with this opponent for a while. So we need to set it up so that this object is in collision with the bolt, and then this taking down the health only happens once. So how do we do that? We go to Add Condition, Advanced, and remember this, Trigger once while true. We're going to left click there, then we're going to click OK. So now with that done, we'll click this again. Now when we press the N key, we can see that this only happens one time. However, now when we press multiple hits, you see that right there? Now the health doesn't go down, so we don't want that, so let's fix that. Okay, the way we fix that is fairly easy. We have this already set up for opponents in collision with bolt. When that happens, take away 10 from the variable vHealth of opponent. Do this once. What we're going to do is click Add Action. We're going to go to Common Action for all objects. We're going to go to Objects. We're going to go to Delete in Object. Gdevelop is saying delete the specified object. We're going to select bolt. Then we're going to click OK. Okay, now we're going to click on the preview button. So now when we press the N key, the health goes down. However, now things work as they should. There are many reasons why Gdevelop is spectacular. Another reason why it's spectacular is when there's issues, it's often very easy to fix those issues in ways that just make sense. Okay, so we have our health bar go down. It seems like it would make sense to have something happen. So what we want to do is click so we have this blue highlighted around our event. And with that done, we know with that we can click this make a new event button, and we'll have the new event come up in a proper place. And what we want to do here is we want to set things up so that something happens. It seems logical that one of the things we can have to happen is just have our opponent disappear. So we're going to go to add condition, common condition for all objects, scroll down, select variables, value of an object's variables, what we want, and compare the value of the variable of an object. We want the opponent. The variable is the health. We're going to left click there. For the sign of the test, we want this to be less than, and we're going to put in the value of the test being 0. And basically what's going on is we're saying, look, when the health gets less than 0, we want something to happen. So we're going to left click on OK. Okay, so we're saying when this happens, do something. Let me go back here for a second. See this invert condition? I saw that when I came out of here. I saw that because I could see this. We don't want that to be inverted. So let's take that off. So now this is correct. Okay, so when the health of the opponent is less than 0, we want something to happen. What do we want to happen? We want the opponent to be deleted. So we're going to go to add action. We're going to go to common action for all objects, delete an object. Then we're going to go to, we see Gdevelop is saying delete specified object. We're going to select opponent. Click here just to get that menu to go away. Then we're going to click OK. So when the health of the opponent is less than 0, delete in the object opponent. So let's see what happens. Excellent. Okay, this next part I'm going to show you just because it's so easy to do. Gdevelop, again, makes it easy for us to do. We have no sound effects. Because Gdevelop is what it is, we can make graphics in Gdevelop. We also can make sound effects in Gdevelop. So let's do that. So here's when our N key is pressed, we have a bolt come out. Let's put a sound effect for this to happen. So we're going to click Add Action. We're going to look for audio. We're going to left click on audio, scroll down. We want to select play a sound and choose a new audio file. We could click that to pick audio outside of here. However, what we can do is click on this little paintbrush. We'll left click here. Then it says create and edit a sound with JFXR. Click that again. And now we have a sound editor in Gdevelop. I'm not sure if you can, how well you can hear the sounds in here. Hopefully you can hear them. But when you look here, you can see we have these things set up, basic video game things. So we have a laser shooting out. So as I click this, I'm just going to explain it to you in case you can't hear or hear that well. Every time I click this, there's a variation of the sound. I like the last sound that played. So since I like that sound, I'm going to go to New File. I'm going to name this SL, which stands for laser sound. And then I'm going to select save. And then see where we see this repeat the sound. I don't want that. I'm going to click no. The rest of this, we're going to leave it as is. We're going to click OK. I'm going to click the launch button here. And I'm not sure how well you can hear that sound or not. But every time the projectile comes out, there's a sound. Very nice, very easy to set up. Extremely easy, being that Gdevelop actually has that sound, that way to make sound built into it. So let's make a sound so that when our bolt actually connects with our opponent, we hear sound. So we're going to click Add Action. We're going to go to Audio. We're going to scroll down. We're going to select Play a Sound. And very similar to before, we're going to click here, go to Create a Sound. I'm going to go to Hit Hurt. So I clicked through until I found a hurt sound that I liked. And then with that, or hit sound that I liked, I'm going to name this H for hit sound. I'm going to click Save. I'm going to click No for repeat the sound. Then I'm going to click OK. I'm going to preview this. I'm not sure if you can hear that, but sure enough, you can. When a projectile comes out, there's a sound. When there's a hit, there's a sound. So one more thing. When our opponent gets deleted, let's click Add Action. Go to Audio. Scroll down to Play a Sound. Click the paintbrush. Click right on the text of Create a Sound Effect with JFXR. You have to click right on the text. When I click through it, JFXR makes different variations of the explosion, which is very nice. So if you're not pleased, you just click again, gives it to you. You can see they're saying you can donate if you want. I would say this is a worthy thing to donate to. This is great that this is in Gdevelop. It's worth donating to JFXR as well as Gdevelop if you choose. And it's nice they give you that option. Like if you want to, you can. They don't force you. So with this delete, this sound for explosion, I'm going to name this ES for explosion sound. I'm going to click Save. I'm going to click No. Then I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to click Preview. Excellent. I'm going to preview this again. Trying to hold up my earphone to the microphone. It's excellent. Okay, the way this health bar is set up, this health bar could be used. I mean, the way it's set up, like the health bar, could be, the programming for this is what I'm talking about, could be easily used for shields. It could be used for ammo packs. So yeah, good stuff. It's nice that Gdevelop is very easy to use, and it is nice that this is given to us for free. That's amazing. Okay, guys, that's it for the tutorial. I hope you learned something. For those of you who liked videos on this channel, reshare this video, give it a thumbs up. If you like the videos on game visuals and you would like to see more, please subscribe, and thank you for watching.